In today's video, I will be giving you 5 tips for writing horror comics, manga, and webtoons. Horror is one of the most entertaining and studied genres in filmmaking. It is also a popular topic in many graphic novels. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, because 70% of my regular viewers are not subscribed. With that being said, let's jump into today's video. This video is proudly brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity. Skillshare is the perfect place to get inspired, learn new skills, and put them to work in impactful ways. Skillshare classes range from photography, illustration, graphic design, animation, freelancing, and more. For my audience, I highly recommend you check out Skillshare's classes focused on creating comics and manga. There are so many great resources for improving your manga artwork and storytelling abilities. Right now I am taking the class Advanced Lessons for Horror Storytellers by Henry Garcia. In this course, I learn the ins and outs of writing horror fiction. For example, did you know making some parts of your story vague is better than answering every single question introduced? Vagueness plays with our sense of natural order and is often overlooked in mainstream horror. Incorporating vagueness does not mean creating a pointless or incomplete story. It means intentionally withholding information from your character and reader. This can make them more vulnerable to the upcoming horrors in your story. This technique was commonly used by the legendary horror author H.P. Lovecraft. I also learned what overused horror tropes and cliches to avoid in my own story. Likewise, I also learned what concepts and themes are not being explored enough in modern horror films and literature. What I love about this specific course is Henry Garcia is a true fan of horror. What I mean by this is he does not limit himself to just studying horror novels or films. He also studies comics, manga, video games, and creepypastas. After you are finished watching this video, I highly recommend you check out this 40-minute course to continue learning about how to write a good horror manga. Skillshare is ad-free, so you can stay in the zone while you are exploring new skills. New premium classes launch every week, so there's always something new to discover on Skillshare. If English is not your first language, Skillshare's entire catalog is now available with subtitles in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my video description and pinned comment will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Take this opportunity to invest in yourself and your goals by becoming a Skillshare member today. Join Skillshare today by using the link in my video description box and my pinned comment. Thank you again, Skillshare, for continuing to support the creative community. Now let's get back to the video. Horror is an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. It is also a genre of fiction that can be divided into multiple subgenres. The key focus of a horror story is to create a sense of dread in the viewer through frightening images, themes, and situations. A horror story consists of 4 key elements: fear, suspense, surprise, and mystery. Horror literature dates back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome, with stories exploring themes of death, demons, evil spirits, and the afterlife. Gothic novels, a genre of horror literature that focused specifically on death, originated in 18th century Europe. This genre emphasized intense emotions, pairing terror with pleasure and death with romance. In 19th and 20th century Europe, horror literature often focused on the occult. It was characterized by its dark aesthetic and eerie stories of the macabre. Modern horror expands upon the ideas explored in the past. They also include newer elements and contemporary themes like serial killers, slashers, and the fear of technological advancements. It is also common for modern horror stories to take influence from other genres like historical fantasy, thrillers, and comedies. When something inanimate resembles a human too closely, it begins to creep into the viewer's fear of the unknown. This sense of familiarity drops sharply once the artificial figure tries but fails to mimic a realistic human. Examples of uncanny figures include lifelike robots, doppelgangers, or shapeshifters. An example of this can be seen in Hanging Balloons by Junji Ito. In that short story, giant balloons appear in Japan. The balloons perfectly resemble the faces of humans and share their voices. Once a balloon is popped, the person sharing their face dies as well. If a balloon manages to find the human that they are impersonating, the balloon will tie a noose around their neck. Something uncanny can feel unsettling, creepy, or taboo. This is because something that feels familiar is suddenly unfamiliar. Modern horror can be divided into several subgenres. Supernatural horror, also known as demonic horror, plays into the fear of the unknown. These stories focus on demons, ghosts, and spirits. These supernatural entities are considered quote-unquote scary because they represent evil in the mythical, religious, and supernatural sense. Popular manga in the supernatural horror genre include Corpse Party, Hanging Balloons, and The Drifting Classroom. Psychological horror plays tricks on the viewer's mind by creating paranoia. It is not about what the audience sees, it is about how the story makes the audience feel. A viewer may feel uneasy because their emotional state is heavily influenced by the realistic themes commonly found in psychological horror. The main characters in these kinds of stories tend to be mentally unstable or emotionally disturbed to the point of becoming violent. Examples of manga in this genre include Zashiki Onna, Higurashi When They Cry, and Hideout. Monster horror focuses exclusively on non-human creatures such as aliens, giant sea creatures, or monsters. In these stories, the monster is typically an antagonist who terrorizes or kills whatever is in their path. Monster horror is considered scary because it plays into our fear of the unknown. We don't know how to react when we see a creature unlike anything we have ever seen before. Universal Studios popularized this subgenre in the 1930s with iconic monsters like Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Creature of the Black Lagoon. Popular manga in this genre include Gyo, Sweet Home, and Kaiju. Slasher horror highlights sinister characters who are human. These characters usually start out as serial killers and accumulate a large kill count by the end of the story. It is common for these villains to stalk their victims and murder them in a gruesome way. This genre was popularized in the 1980s with iconic villains like Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and Jason Voorhees. Readers resonate with slasher horror because of how realistic these fictional villains are portrayed. These are monsters who do exist in real life. Examples of slasher horror manga include Dead Tube, Another, and Pumpkin Night. Zombie horror is a combination of monster horror and supernatural horror. By definition, zombies are undead creatures who are cannibalistic by nature. They can infect their victims with a single bite, allowing them to multiply. It doesn't matter how many zombies you kill, they just keep coming back for more. Popular zombie comics include The Walking Dead, I Am a Hero, and Marvel Zombies. Vampire horror is an extension of monster horror that focuses on immortal, bloodthirsty creatures who resemble humans. In modern writing, vampires are not always portrayed as the villain. They can sometimes be the hero of the story or a side character. Examples of vampire manga include Vampire Knight, Hellsing, and the Case Study of Vanitas. Witchcraft horror uses supernatural elements like magic to create fear. Witches have been feared throughout history for their ability to curse their victims. If you don't believe me, I highly recommend you research the Salem witch trials. Popular witchcraft manga include Majo, Maho Shoujo Sight, and XXX Holic. Techno horror focuses on the fear of technology. These types of stories are often cautionary tales that highlight how technology is a direct force of evil, an indirect cause for bad things to happen, or able to be manipulated by people in power to do evil things. This subgenre gained popularity during the 1960s when the world was moving towards the creation of the internet. These were periods of rapid technological advancement that left many people feeling uneasy. Techno horror often explored themes of privacy, freedom, individuality, wealth disparity, and dystopia. Examples of techno horror manga include Terraformers, Serial Experiments Lane, and Ghost in the Shell. Comedic horror is a subgenre that is equally funny as it is scary. These stories take the viewer to complete opposite ends of the horror spectrum, resulting in a roller coaster of emotions. Popular horror comedy manga include Mirako-chan, Franken-Fran, and Soreware no Shiwaza Des. While Western horror fiction focuses on psychological horror, suspense, and supernatural horror, Japanese horror, or J-horror for short, focuses on exorcisms, shamanism, precognition, and yokai. Japanese horror originates from folklore that was passed through generations by word of mouth during the Edo period. These ghost stories were known as kaidan, or strange stories. Early kaidan include Otogi Boko, Inga Monogatari, and Otogi Monogatari. Characters based on yokai are commonly found in anime and manga. The term yokai translates to strange apparition and refers to supernatural entities or spirits in Japanese folklore. Yokai are not literally demons in the Western sense of the word, but instead spirits and entities. Their behavior ranges from evil to mischievous to generous. Yokai often have animal features. Examples of popular yokai include Kappa, a turtle-like entity, Tengu, a bird-like entity, and Kitsune, a fox spirit. There are many yokai who appear humanoid, such as Kuchisaki Onna, the Slipmouth Woman, Hanako-san, the school toilet spirit, and Yuki Onna, the Snow Woman. Some yokai even resemble inanimate objects. This can be seen with the Tsukumogami, or tool gods. On the flip side, some yokai have no discernible shape. Yokai are typically described as having spiritual or supernatural abilities. Shapeshifting is the most common trait associated with them. A popular yokai with this ability is the tanuki. To fully understand the history of J-horror, we need to go back to traditional Japanese theater. There are two main types of Japanese theater, No and Kabuki. No theater is the oldest surviving form of Japanese theater. It combines music, dance, and acting to communicate Buddhist themes. No theater often showcases tales from traditional Japanese literature with supernatural elements. Kabuki theater is a more modern theater that was incredibly popular during the Edo period. People would come to see performances that lasted from morning until sunset. It is known for its heavily stylized performances and glamorous costumes. No and Kabuki theater both presented stories that focused on vengeful spirits, demons, or death. Many of the storylines in these traditional plays inspired modern Japanese horror. This can be seen with the physical description of the iconic ghost character Sadako from Ringu. Her long black hair and vengeful spirit were motifs popularized in No and Kabuki theater. This same physical description is also used for the vengeful spirits in Black Hair, The Grudge, and Yotsuya Kaidan. Earlier, I mentioned that kaidan or strange tales were shared by word of mouth during the Edo period. Usually this was through a game known as the Hyakumonogatari, Kaidan Kai, which translates to a gathering of 100 supernatural tales. For this tradition, a group of people and 100 candles are required. Each person would either share ghost stories from Japanese folklore or their own anecdotes. After each story concludes, a candle will be blown out. It was believed that whenever a candle was blown out, a channel would appear in the physical world, allowing ghosts or spirits to pass through. Legends say that when all 100 candles are blown out, a supernatural event may occur. This game was originally played by samurai as a test of courage, but it quickly became more widespread. After the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, Japanese horror evolved into stories that focused on radiation mutants, post-apocalyptic societies, and kaiju. The term kaiju refers to a giant monster such as Godzilla, Mothra, and Kong. You might have seen kaiju in series like Attack on Titan, Evangelion, and Kaiju number 8. In the 1980s, there was a distinct shift away from gory slasher-style type horror to psychologically thrilling and intensely atmospheric stories. As you can probably tell, Western and Eastern horror fiction are connected. They influenced each other throughout history to become what they are today. In contemporary Japanese horror, haunted houses and the breaking up of nuclear families are popular topics. Monstrous mothers also became a popular motif in modern Japanese horror. This can be seen in the hit manga series Blood on the Tracks. Jumping into the current state of horror manga, we have to talk about Junji Ito. Junji Ito is a Japanese manga artist who is very well known for his horror stories. He gained worldwide fame after his horror manga was translated into English by Viz Media. Some of his most notable works include Uzumaki, Tomui, and Gyo. He has also published numerous anthologies featuring many of his horror manga one-shots. He is famous for his abstract horror, terrifying imagery, and social commentary, but he isn't the only famous horror manga artist. Kazuo Umezu, Junji Ito's biggest influence, created the legendary horror manga series The Drifting Classroom and God's Left Hand, Devil's Right Hand. More recently, Tomoki Izumi is making waves with her horror comedy manga series Mirako-chan. Aside from these creators, there are plenty more amazing horror manga out there. Horror manga is more popular now than it has ever been before. If you were thinking about creating your own horror comic, manga, or webtoon, then now is the perfect time to do it. With that being said, let's jump into today's 5 tips for writing horror manga. Tip number 1, cut off your main characters from their everyday world. When you are writing horror fiction, it is important to create a setting that is unfamiliar to your main characters. Cutting off your main character could be physical. For example, having your main characters travel to an unknown location, trapped inside of a building, or losing their means of communication. This can be seen in the manga series Corpse Party. The main characters are teleported to an alternate reality after performing a ritual. This puts the characters in an unknown location that is filled with evil spirits and dead bodies. The main characters are put into a situation where they are physically unable to leave and are in danger. They must uncover the truth of this new world in order to save their lives and return home. Cutting off could also be mental. Maybe your main character doesn't physically leave the comfort of their hometown. Maybe they are cut off from reality or struggling with an internal conflict. This could result in them being unable to connect with other characters. An example of this can be seen in the manga series Higurashi When They Cry. The main character, Keiichi Maebara, is the new kid in town and finds himself isolated from everyone around him. At first, his new home seems calm and peaceful, but in reality, the entire village is covering up a series of premeditated murders. When Keiichi learns this, he becomes the next target for the village. He is unable to rely on his family because they are away on a business trip, and he's unable to rely on his friends because they are a part of the cover-up. By cutting off your character from their normal life, you create an inciting incident where the stakes are raised and a story is set in motion. Tip number 2, take inspiration from your own fears. You don't have to be an emotionless person to write a terrifying horror story. Everyone has something they are afraid of. You should take advantage of that. You know firsthand what sends chills down your spine. As irrational as that fear may be, there are countless people in the world with the same fear as you. Look at a manga like High Rise Invasion. It revolves around the fear of heights. The manga Uzumaki revolves around the fear of spirals. The manga Starving Anonymous revolves around the fear of eating meat. Use your fears to write stories that people can relate to. By exploring what makes you afraid, you'll be able to increase the scariness of your story. Tip number 3, embrace the chaos. A key characteristic of horror fiction is a lack of control. Humans like to think that they are in control of everything in every moment. We think we understand how everything works. We use technology, science, and our bodies to rule the animal kingdom. But what happens when that control slips away? Horror fiction traditionally deals with taboo subjects like death, madness, and the transgression of moral and physical boundaries. Infants are murdered and the dead are brought back to life. Household pets are turned into monsters, and psychopaths live next door. Think of a manga series like DeadTube. DeadTube is a fictional snuff film website that rewards creators who upload the most shocking videos. The main character is a shy videographer who is tricked into recording a premeditated murder and discovers that he enjoyed watching it. This unlocked the sadistic side of him that he has always kept bottled inside. Horror fiction shows us that the control we think we have is an illusion that could give at any moment. We constantly exist in a state of chaos and control, where one wrong decision could change our lives forever. Tip number 4, reinvent horror tropes. Horror plays into the fear of the unknown. Humans fear what they do not understand. With that being said, how can you stand out with a horror story today? Haunted houses, vampires, and serial killers are all motifs that we have seen before. You've seen zombies before, you've seen giant monsters before, and you've seen aliens before. You could probably guess what happens in each kind of story. As your audience begins to understand these old tropes, they become more familiar and ultimately less effective. To stand out, consider exploring new themes that have distinct twists on what has already been done before. You don't want your horror story to feel boring or predictable. Research what cliches are popular in your horror subgenre and do something different. Think of a manga series like Mahou Shoujo of the End. It completely reinvents the zombie apocalypse genre by replacing zombies with bloodthirsty magical girl demons. Tip number 5, take inspiration from different cultures. Horror is different all over the world.
By studying what other horror writers are doing, you'll be able to deviate from what everyone else in your circle is doing. Well, that's gonna wrap up today's video. If you got some value out of this, then please leave this video a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below telling us about your favorite horror comic, manga, or webtoon. As always, keep creating, everyone. I will see you all in the next one.